welcome to this week's installment of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale with Don Henniger. I'm Don. With me as my podcast partner and Scottsdale scholar, Kevin Maxwell.
Hello, Headmaster Henniger.
Oh my gosh, Kevin.
How are you?
I'm just doing fine. I'm doing fine, but we've got a very important story to deal with today.
It's a packed agenda today.
It's a packed agenda with one topic, but we're going to dig right into it. And it's a tough issue. It involves the Scottsdale Unified School District. We've got two guests, Julie Cieniawski, who is president of the governing board for the district, and Becky Williams, who's president of the Scottsdale Education Association. Welcome, Julie and Becky.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. We're going to dig right into the issue at hand today, and that involves Superintendent Scott Menzel. 3 of our local state legislators have started a campaign asking for the removal of Dr. Menzel for some remarks he made 3 years ago while he was still working in Michigan. They're claiming that the remarks are supposedly racist in nature, and that's what we're here to talk about. Today, with governing board president and head of the teachers union, we've got a wide net from which to talk about all this. So, Julie, let's get started with a little background on the nature of Scott's remarks and how they surfaced now 3 years later, and what that letter from the legislators really means. What you think about that?
That's a lot to tear apart right there.
I know. One step at a time.
One step at a time. Well, the interview that took place was back in 2019, prior to Dr. Menzel being hired to be the superintendent of Scottsdale Schools, which, by the way, was a very inclusive process, including our community. We had, I think, 4 different interview committees to onboard the right superintendent for our Scottsdale School District. Yes. And I did have the opportunity, as I believe President Williams also had the opportunity to be on one of those committees. And to me, this wasn't ever anything very relevant to his hiring, because I'm very aware that information can be taken out of context. And I believe that is exactly what's happened here is tidbits of information from an extended interview on a very serious topic were taken out of context, twisted, manipulated, and are basically being used for political leverage to remove a very centered, caring leader in our Scottsdale School District community. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And what's interesting to me is to see how much steam these little tidbits of information, pick up.
They do.
People aren't checking facts. They're
exactly
not
right.
caring about understanding the context of a message. And to be quite honest, I was a little apprehensive coming here today to even talk about it, because someone could take a sentence of anything we say here and use it for a totally different unintended purpose.
The world we live in today.
Julie, just for a point of reference, this is a nationwide search for superintendent. Is that right?
Absolutely.
How many candidates? Tell us a little bit about the background and where the search started. How extensive was it?
Well, it was a national search. At the time, we had an interim superintendent. We've actually had 13 superintendents in the last 26 years in Scottsdale.
That's not a good record. Not
good at all. And that instability in leadership impacts our community, impacts our businesses, it impacts the morale of our community. It impacts the opinion that people have of Scottsdale. Yes, we're a great destination for vacations, and we've got the Super Bowl and the big golf tournament in town, and we have lots of great things going on here. But, that lack of consistent leadership, I think, creates a negative mark on our community. And, I was brought in as one of the community members on one of those committees. And I was at the time a candidate for school board. Obviously, I've been involved in living in this city for over 30 years. And aside from being a teacher in this community in Scottsdale schools, have done various forms of volunteering and involvement in different organizations. I care about Scottsdale. So it was important to me for the school district to find a person who cared about all individuals that we serve in our district public schools. students and all of our employees. And
Sure.
Scottsdale Schools is a large employer. And, the retention issue of school employees is real. It impacts the ability for staff members to be supported in working with our kids. So one of my primary goals was for us to find someone who understood the challenges of working in the public schools and was willing to embrace all of those challenges and all of our students and employees and give them that place that they belong.
Becky, tell me about what the teachers think about what's happening here. What are you hearing from your members?
Teachers would just like our elected leaders to focus on the resources and supports that we need to do our jobs and be in our classrooms teaching our students. There are real obstacles to teaching and learning. And when we bring up these fake issues and fake outrage over these non-issues, it takes the focus away from what we need to be doing in our classrooms.
Totally agree, Becky.
It's a crisis that doesn't exist.
Exactly. It's fabricated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very intentional. We've had several of these in the past take place in Scottsdale. And, people are saying, what's going to happen next? Like there's always something. So until I think the city of Scottsdale and all of its residents stand up against such action, they're going to be lingering and hanging around.
There is a lot of community support for Dr. Menzel. And I've received probably 25, 30 long emails from people who support him, and a lot from the business community who are really upset that 3 state lawmakers would start digging into the local school board issue. What are your feelings about that in terms of your reaction to that? With getting a letter from the 3 lawmakers in District 3 saying we want him removed, that seems pretty drastic.
Let's just add to that. There was also another legislator who was just elected for the first time into our state legislature, who also sent a message, an independent message, and he's from LD4, and that's Matt Grass.
Okay, right, new guy.
So
Right.
new guy, yeah. And the weird thing is he has served on a school board, and he also
Worked in a classroom.
Hey, really? Wow.
So to me, it was crossing lines big time.
Mm-hmm.
There's truly a defiance of trust in the public education system when one of their own crosses that line. And that was basically my remark to him. I felt like it was a huge overstep. And I told him that. And I also told our other legislators how inappropriate I thought their outreach was and their overreach. And
How did you do that, Julie? Did you call them? Did you email them? Did you confront them in the grocery store?
No, actually what I did is I responded to their messages, their email messages, because the one from Representative Chaplake actually came on official letterhead from the state legislature. And so did Gress's. And then all 3 signatures of Culloden, Kavanaugh, and Chaplake were included in the bottom. And at that point, I was like, I'm going to rat-tat-tat out my response and send it. And I know better than to send a response that's kind of emotional. So what I did is I sat on it for a while and thought about how I convey how inappropriate it was, because I was elected to work on district governance. They were not elected to do that yet. And as I understand it, the platform of their party representation, as I understand it, as a former social studies teacher, it's on small government. It's not on overreach. It's basically statewide governance is what they should be doing. And local governance, whether it's our city council or our school boards, they were elected to deal very explicitly with the issues of city or schools. So, I voice my opinion to my representatives, but I would never think about sending something on. If I was an attorney, I wouldn't send it on my letterhead from my law firm unless it really dealt with a legal situation. So I felt like it was an inappropriate push of power into school district governance, and I shared that with them.
Becky, did you respond to that in any way too?
I actually was asked for comment for a couple local publications.
Sure.
So I have submitted an op-ed, and I said the same thing, that, our educators in our classrooms wish that our elected leaders would focus on real issues facing classroom teachers and our public schools and deal with those issues.
Good point.
Don, I want to be a devil's advocate for a second here, because you said something a minute ago that I want to comment on. You said that there's a lot of support in our community for Dr. Menzel. And I want to agree with you, because I've heard the same thing you have. A lot of friends have reached out. I've seen all the op-ed pieces, and there seems to be a pretty good groundswell. Last night at the school board meeting, there was pretty good people in the audience, and there was some really good support for Dr. Menzel. But let me ask you, do you think there really is? Because I think that, Jim Lane came out, and we all know Jim Lane, and he's our friend. He came out and also called for the removal of Dr. Menzel. And when they paint him with that brush of, Midwestern liberal woke superintendent, and once he gets painted with that brush, all those people who don't know who he is, have never interacted with him, they're just going to see that. And I'm just wondering, I'm thinking there's a real groundswell of people out there who do not support him, and only because they don't know what. And that's the reason why we're doing this podcast today. One of the reasons why is to bring awareness, right? That's what Scott does, bring awareness, right? So what do you think about that?
I think it's not unanimous. But I think there is an overwhelming, my guess, and just from I see and the comments I've received from people, I've received, I think, maybe 3 emails from business people that would side kind of on the Jim Lane side that you talked about. But again, 25, 28 emails from people, many in the business community, who actually are in support of him. So I think it's not unanimous.
Yeah.
And I think probably when you have this podcast will air a week before your next meeting. And I think at your next meeting, when you take public comment, you're going to get a lot of public comment to the negative as well. What I hope, and this reminds me of what we do with city council all the time, all the people who are mad about things show up and complain and are at meetings. But the people who basically support stuff like this may not show up. And I think part of what we're trying to do is rally people to come up and speak their mind in support of Dr. Menzel. So we can hear an honest assessment of what the community really is thinking about this.
And when those words come out honestly, that's when you get progress in a community. So, I don't think there's ever a time to sleep at the wheel. It can't happen in this day and age. People do not take the time to find facts. When you talk about Mayor Lane's op-ed, I read it and I was really disappointed because I doubt he read the entirety of the interview that was in the context of this. And
he probably read whatever was taken out, and he read in another article which referenced it. He did not read the interview himself, and I've got it right here. It's 8 pages long, so it's 5,600 words.
Probably right, exactly right.
I read every single word.
I have two. I have two.
Yep.
But I also know him. We work very closely together. I don't agree with everything Dr. Menzel says or does, but that's okay. A trusting relationship is really something that is proven over time. It takes compromise. It takes understanding. Our perspectives are different on the education world and on the needs of education. But here's the bonus is Dr. Menzel is always willing to meet with individuals. And when I ask individuals who are upset about things to meet with me, often they say no.
Really?
They want to just be angry.
Right.
They don't want to have a solution or a better understanding. For some reason, anger gives some individuals purpose. I don't get it.
I hear the same thing from city council members. Same exact thing. Yeah. Tammy will tell you, Tammy Caputi will tell you the same thing. Linda Millhaven, whoever, Betty, Tom, whatever. That's the same kind of phenomenon. It's unfortunate. What I wonder about, and I don't know the answer to this because I haven't talked to them. Did any of these state lawmakers or even Mayor Lane, did anybody actually talk to Dr. Menzel? No, they didn't. And so they make their opinions and they write their articles. It takes me back to my good old journalism roots. Talk to both sides. I'm assuming that nobody talked to Scott.
Well, and Becky had mentioned about responding to reporters. That's one of the first things I ask is, have you had a conversation with Dr. Menzel? Have you asked him questions about this?
Right.
Develop a better understanding, context before you make judgment.
Do you want to be fair or not?
Right.
Well, and I would venture just from what I read of responses and people who are angry about the word, they were taken out of context. And I've encouraged anyone who's questioned it or questioned the intentions of our superintendent, to go back and read the original interview,
Me
because
too.
you can't make a judgment if you don't have the correct context.
Isn't that what we teach our children in the schools? Seriously.
Make a claim, back it up with evidence.
Absolutely.
Well, like Kevin said, he read the whole article. That you need to do that. Take the time to understand the issue.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
Yeah.
Becky, you made a statement last night, and it was fantastic. And I can either read part of it on your behalf, or you're right here in front of me, or I can read your words, or if you don't have it, you can read it too. I just want you to read just one little thing. Would that be okay?
Of course.
What do you want to do? You want to read it, or me to read it for you? Or
Let her read it.
Okay, thank
Here.
you. Yeah, I don't have the script in front of me, but
Yeah, there you
I
go.
have to be very scripted when I'm.
okay, well there you go. That's the part that I thought was very poignant.
It was good.
All right. As professionals, we expect this board to uphold stated policy to create and sustain a progressive professional climate and operational procedures that call for and use the full creative capacities of all employees in the attainment of educational goals. Every day on the job, we strive as educators to create spaces where all of our students are included, accepted, cared for, and respected, and can learn. We expect our elected leaders to provide the resources needed to make this happen, and to focus on solutions to the real issues that create obstacles to teaching and learning. Instead, we are accused and attacked. The moment a lesson hints at diversity or a student's emotional needs are considered, we are bombarded with manufactured outrage that teachers are indoctrinating students with a racially divisive agenda or grooming them into a gender identity crisis. I assure you these things are not happening in our buildings, nor is there a secret plan to do so. We simply want to teach our students.
There you go. Two things that stand out about me at that. One, twice you say we as educators expect something from our elected leaders, and they're not delivering on that. They're right.
Not all of them.
Oh, well.
We're talking about
I'm sorry.
her audience intended. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it.
Sorry.
Not
Julie.
everybody at this
You know
table,
what I was talking
Julie.
about. Yeah. Sorry. I should have paraphrased that. I should have fixed that.
Avoid those absolutes.
Good
Yeah,
point.
exactly.
We expect-
Again,
we
another
expect.
teachable moment for my. For
I'm
me.
pretty certain most of the time we have a 3-2 vote on things that, these real issues. So.
And it
Exactly.
shouldn't be that way. Bottom line is best interest of kids should be the focus. And I've said it before, I'll continue to say it until people believe it. You can't consider the best interest of our kids in our district public schools or in any school without considering the needs to support the employees that work with them.
Right.
You were making another point, Kevin. Did we get all your points in there?
Oh, the other one I was going to make is okay. So she didn't say it by name, but I think she's probably referring to that people have different definitions of what this silly little CRT thing is, right? And whenever and Becky's right, whenever people, educators talk about diversity or anything about social emotional welfare, people say, well, that's CRT. It is not CRT.
That's CRT. No.
CRT is a very well. I'll let you guys. You have two educators in front of me that can explain it way better than I do. But I mean, this is a very complicated, very high academic concept, and there's no way. Somebody told me something yesterday that made me a lot of sense. They said not only is CRT not taught in our schools, we don't have anybody who could even possibly teach it because it's so complex. There's no a high school student could understand it, could absorb the material. We have nobody who can even possibly teach it if they did. Am I right?
Right. Absolutely. And I spent a good portion of my career teaching social studies. And as a teacher, I've never had a course of CRT, critical race theory. Because I've never had a course and I didn't know of this course until it became this catchphrase, if you will, for anything requiring students to critically think, which is one of our goals as educators. We want kids to think beyond what is obvious.
Critical thinking.
Science, mathematics, historians, writers. Critical thinking is a skill we really want every human being to be able to do. It's basically a safety mechanism as well. In regards to critical race theory, and even my husband, he never had a course like that as an attorney. So it's a very defined focus, as I understand it, explaining the role that race has fit into legal legal kind of like advantage in our society.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't think of, and I worked with gifted students for many years, that it wouldn't be appropriate for me to even, have a discussion with my students on that. Do we discuss race? Absolutely. As a history teacher, that is a huge part of what we teach about race and about how that has, like, people that have come here from different areas of the world have come together to form this United States of America. And so, talking about all the benefits that different cultures bring, I think is very important to have those discussions. Never intending, I want to just repeat that, never intending to make a child feel inferior or embarrassed or ashamed of their own race, but to understand past treatments of groups of individuals. I think that's responsible education.
And I'll just say that from what I've understand in reading that, in the 60s, we had the civil rights movement, right? And we passed a lot of laws that were supposed to fix what had been years and years and years of racism. But yet here we are, 70 years later, we still have racism. Those laws didn't fix the problem. And that's what the study of critical race theory is, from what I understand, is why is that still existing? Because it's baked into cultural things that goes beyond legal concepts.
Systemic.
Yeah,
Right.
systemic. People have to choose to fix the problems.
And now it's a political rallying point.
Yeah.
And even a couple months ago, maybe it was a year ago now, where they were protesting against CRT training at some of your school board meetings when you don't have that program in the schools. Didn't matter. It still made for a good protest point.
Right. And it became a protest point. It became a political flag, if you will.
Wasn't Tom Horn, when he was elected, his campaign sign said to stop CRT.
Well, guess what? He can check that off the box because it doesn't exist.
Because they don't have it.
Right, yeah.
Never has. So
I thought it was interesting when this whole thing was brought up on Fox News. Did Fox News Digital re-aired the story or reposted the story again on the website? That got everything rolling again. And I love the way I was reading the Fox News report on this, the way they described how they found it. They said they unearthed this interview from Dr. Menzel. I'm thinking, unearthed? Does that mean they dug up dirt? That's what unearthed means, right?
Right.
So the whole thing comes from a place that just gives me discomfort, particularly as a journalist who's worried about facts and fairness and context and issues like that. This one just misses all of the key points.
I agree. And there have been times that I have shared that with journalists, like put it in writing, because I can't always trust that my words are going to be interpreted properly. So I use quotation marks and I put it in writing.
Sure.
Because then I can prove what I said if I need to. So,
well, good reporting can usually bear witness that some of this stuff can get straightened out a little bit, but we haven't had a lot of good reporting over this either. So that's unfortunate as well. We have to stand up for ourselves. So what's next as we head in? Again, this podcast will air a week before your next meeting. What's going to be happening between now and then?
Well, you had mentioned you received several emails. I've received hundreds of emails.
I'll bet. Yeah.
You know what? I think it's really important that people communicate with the people that they elect to represent them. So anyone who cares about the well-being of our kids and our employees in the public schools should be communicating with their local school board. Not any one or two or three or four governing board members, but all five of us, because independently, individually, we are just part of the piece of that pie. Collectively, we make our decisions. So I think it's really important for people to do their research. I think the article is floating around, easy to of the interview I'm talking about, easy to gain access to, and for people to critically read it. And if they have questions, I would suggest they reach out to Dr. Menzel. If they have questions after reading it, he'd be happy to, clarify what the intent of the interview was and the context of the literature that was being discussed in that interview.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think it's also important for people not just to email their school board members, all of them, and that would be SUSD.
It's gov. BRD.
There we go.
SUSD.org.
I don't email myself very often, so it's go ahead. Let's say that again.
GovBRD at SUSD.org.
GOVBRD.
at
At
susd.org.
So think of governing board, gov board at SU. Right,
Thank you.
right.
And then our next public meeting is February 21st at Coronado High School in the governing board room. The meeting starts at 6 p.m. People can show up,
Why wasn't public comment allowed at MDA meetings? Is it a different type of meeting? Or?
First of all, it's a different type of meeting. It's considered a special meeting. No governing board actually has to allow public comment according to law, but we choose that because we do care about the input of our community. Yeah. So public comment is people can sign up in advance. They want to just say, hey, I support the public schools, appreciate the direction and the hard work that's been committed to, and let's keep it going. They can sign up to say something that simple, or they get up to 2 minutes. Now, it depends on the number of requests for public comment. I always figure like a minute is great, unless you're someone who's representing a larger group of individuals, like Becky Williams here, who's the president of Scottsdale Education Association and represents our certified employee groups. She does have the ability to give board updates or give updates on what's going on.
Sure.
But as an individual of the community, anyone is welcome to do that. Yeah.
Becky, are you going to rally the teachers in some way or plan to meet with them to do something for the meeting?
We might have some plans going on with that, yes.
So you already wrote, and Kevin already referred to it, a wonderful statement that you read at the last board meeting. So that was really well done.
Which we were... that was a scheduled agenda item that we had the luxury of time at the microphone. So,
and I would like to, I've said to Becky before, thank you for putting her portion together of it. And it was hard for me to hear it because it really opens up the damage and wounds that I've experienced in Scottsdale schools in the past with bad leadership. And just the whole idea of, it was very raw because it was about focusing on kids. And I feel like that is our charge. That is what we should be doing, is focusing on kids. So,
Julie, was it hard because it brought out some frustration that you're very aware of? Because the kids, like you said, it's probably a deterrent to teaching, actually.
Absolutely. And that's my concern, because I saw a lot of good teachers leave our Scottsdale school district. I also saw a lot of good teachers not just leave our district or our state, but I've seen them leave the profession. And to me, after dedicating 30 years to the profession of public education and seeing how hard teachers work every single day for something that is fabricated to make their life harder, makes no sense to me. It's super frustrating because the folks that get left behind, teachers can find other jobs. They have a lot of skills that are very valued in the rest of the world. But the losers are the kids.
Sure. And that's why it's emotional, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think I referred to it too, just the stability and that we've had under Dr. Menzel's tenure for the past 3 years is more consistency that most families have experienced in SUSD for the last decade.
Good point.
And I think the employees feel that probably most of the stakeholder groups.
The uncertainty, the inconsistency, the changes in leadership, and the ebbs and flows that go with that, just knowing there's someone dedicated to stay at the helm with steady leadership it lets us focus on our students, and we don't have to worry what's coming next. And then we have stronger morale and we're better in the classroom with our students. So
exactly right. Good points.
Yeah.
So is the board required to take action in any of this? And is there anything that you can do? Is it going to be an agenda item? So there's going to be an activity that you're going to do at your next meeting?
So we typically set our agendas for the board meetings a week prior. And so that will take place next week. We'll see.
Yeah.
Folks can, we sit at the meeting and say, we really try to focus on what work needs to be done.
Sure.
And stay out of these weeds that have been continually, thrown into our pond, if you will. And just stay focused on what our district. We have contracts coming up for our employees. We've got a lot of important things. We've got state testing. How do we support our teachers and our students through those processes? We've got a lot coming up.
You're not
Real
required,
work.
but you're not required to do anything.
No,
These guys
no.
send you a letter, and that's
Yeah.
fine. Thanks for the letter. See you later,
Oh,
right?
Yeah. And the response and the pressure has been immense. So
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
that was also part of the emotion last night.
Yeah.
Was the stress is unbelievable. And because I care about what I'm doing, I think if you went in there and hearing the presentations last night, which by the way, they were, as I understand it, those were not coordinated between our administrators, our support staff, and our certified staff. Each of the leaders had their own time. And it was very similar in ways and very powerful collectively. And they didn't sit down and write those together. So to me, that said that those that are most needing to be supported feel supported with Dr. Menzel at the helm. And to me, that means we keep him, we retain him, we do what we can to support him, because as a governing board, Dr. Menzel is our only employee. We are not to be micromanaging
Sure.
the district.
How's he doing? Have you talked to him? How's he
Yeah,
handling all
yeah.
this? Is he doing okay?
You know, he is the type of guy who says, when you ask how he's doing, he's like, "Oh, I'm living the dream in Scottsdale."
There you go.
And I'm like,
Yeah, maybe.
"Yeah, I know. He puts on a brave face."
Yeah.
And so I do get concerned. I think he cares so much about what he does. I don't think he wants to worry other people about his well-being.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
That's what good leaders do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Julie, you're talking about you saw a lot of educators leave the profession.
Yeah.
I saw a video the other day of a teacher who had left her profession, and she was a gig worker now, driving for Uber or whatever. And in the video, she says, my passion didn't pay my bills. My passion did not get me through my work day. She's even as passionate about it, but now I'm able to pay my bills and able to sustain myself. But
Isn't that sad?
yeah,
Yeah.
It is.
I thought that was really interesting.
That was one of the points of pride with Dr. Menzel at the helm, is him recognizing the value of retaining our employees
Mm-hmm.
and being creative in ways like doing pilots, programs of compensation for certain employees. They have to drive a certain amount of distance to work. For example, our food service workers, if they drive more than 10 miles to work one way, each way, they get an additional stipend in their pay.
It's good.
He's willing to be creative. He's very thoughtful in his leadership. So
Exactly what we need, especially in with the cost of housing here. And, most of your employees are living somewhere else.
Yep.
Hopefully not within 10 miles, but somewhere else outside of Scottsdale.
Yep.
That's for sure. Well, we could go on for a long time, and we probably should come back and revisit once the dust settles and all this. But Kevin, any other questions?
I just want to ask Becky one more question, because but I read that thank you for reading that little paragraph that you did. But earlier in that, you talked a little bit about retention, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, obviously we talked about that with Dr. Menzel was here, and we talked about everybody. We talked about the police department. We talked about the fire department. Retention's an issue, but what are some of the challenges that teachers are facing right now?
And it's not an issue that's specific to Scottsdale. We're seeing it statewide, nationwide. Teachers are leaving the profession. And I would say, just from what I see and what I hear, a real big driver of it are these attacks that we're seeing, and school boards seeming to become more hostile towards teachers, teaching real history and paying attention to our students' social and emotional needs, and creating this false narrative that we are harming students when all we're doing is teaching them. So it literally is the last straw for many educators. They find more respect in other professions, even if it's driving an Uber, and they don't have to worry about these emotional burdens they're taking home from the job with them. So,
and by the way, the social emotional learning of a human being, that means the mental well-being.
Yeah.
And we're very aware of, as a society, we have, it's almost been a shameful thing to think about your mental health and to have conversations about that. And as teachers and people that work with kids, you recognize how that impacts their ability to learn.
Sure.
That's always been a focus. When I started teaching, it was always a focus of a lesson. the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor domain of learning.
It's relationship before rigor. We can't expect the rigor unless we have a respectful relationship with our students, and that's being turned on its head and making educators feel like they're doing something wrong if they care about their students.
Mm-hmm.
Trust.
Yes.
Also trust, the lack of trust right now. Yeah, it's tough. Well, we're going to have you back because we want to end this on a good note. It might take another podcast to do that because we got a tough issue ahead of us right now. That's for sure. But you know what? We sure appreciate your passion, both Julie and Becky, for all the work you're doing on behalf of Scottsdale schools and all of the kids in our schools and our children. And we can't thank you enough for that and for your passion and dedication. And I hope your passion and dedication rubs off on everybody you run into. We're going to need a lot more of that in times like this. So just thank you so much from Kevin and I. Just thrilled to have you on today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thanks for caring enough about this topic to invite us in.
You bet.
Yeah.
And thanks to all of you for listening today. If you're interested, show up when you need to be show up. Email governing board members about what you think about this issue. Don't be silent when you can make a difference. We look forward to being back with you again for our next edition of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale.